also, please do sign in because that information will be important when you get paid later. So great. Welcome. I mentioned a little bit about me. I am the ed tech at La Paz Middle School. My name is Stephen Elliott. Email is just what you would expect. So if you are looking to reach out to me after this training, please do so. It is a part of my job to assist teachers and support staff with technology. So this is a passion of mine, spreadsheets, but it is also a part of my job description. Little personal things about me. I love video games, I love fancy pens, and I love spreadsheets. If you want to start a conversation with me about either of those three subjects, I will be your friend for life. And the purpose behind what I'm doing here today is that I think that technology in the classroom and supporting the work we do in the classroom is meant to just speed up and make our communication more efficient. The faster we can get information to students, the faster we have, the better chance we have of them actually using that information to improve, and also helping us decide what we want to do with what we're doing in our classes. So that's the purpose behind this. And I'm not 100% an expert. I do encourage questions. Even this week, I've learned about 2 new spreadsheet functions, just trying to solve problems and questions that have come up in the other spreadsheet classes that I taught earlier in the week. So even if I don't have the answer, I maybe if the answer exists, I will find it and I will follow up with you. But we'll try our best with what we've got today. And as I'm sure you know, spreadsheets are a deep subject. We could get into the weeds for hours and hours on all the little things that make spreadsheets function, pun intended, the way that they do. But the focus of today's lesson is going to be functions specifically and how they work. So things about formatting, things about sharing privileges and locking or unlocking parts of a spreadsheet so they can or can't be edited. Those things are a little bit outside of what we're talking about today. And to give us enough time to really get into all of these deep subjects, I may direct you towards other resources if you ask questions about that. And I did link my previous trainings. I delivered Spreadsheets Don't Have to Be Scary on Wednesday and a love letter to spreadsheets on Thursday. If you attended our Q Rockstar conference, Q Rockstar conference, excuse me, back in spring, you would have had a chance to hear my love letter to spreadsheets, and it was also delivered at Spring Q. So that's been around the docket, but those slideshow presentations are right there. Later this week, I'll also put the video recording from the sessions I did this morning there. So there's extra resources for you if you need some other basic stuff. But today we are talking about spreadsheet functions. So a function is an expression. Give me a thumbs up if you're a math person out there in the meeting. If you're into math, some of this is going to make sense to you more automatically than those of us who are not math people. I'm more of a humanities type of person. So it doesn't come naturally to me, but if I can learn it, so can you. And basically what those functions do is they automatically perform the calculation. We've got a thumbs down for math. All right, fair enough. It automatically performs the function or the calculation for you. And that allows you to not have to do the math or the importing or the filtering, depending on what it is that you're looking at. It just does it automatically. You could see an example in the corner here. This is a sum function, one of the more simple functions. It's adding, and you can't see the numbers to the side of the spreadsheet in my screenshot, but this is column A, and then 1, 2, and 3. So this is adding. It's a sum of A1 to A3. And you can already see the preview. It says the number 11. And if I pressed enter on this in a spreadsheet, it would just say the number 11. But what it really is a function that returns the number 11. So it's like a button that we can add to our spreadsheet that will automatically give us the info we want. And if one of these numbers changed, like if this 2 was a 3, then that number would be 12. It updates automatically. So you could see how that could be useful when you're dealing with data that's changing all the time. Okay, Um, you may come back to this if I confuse you in any way by using these terms. Please do pause me, put me, give me a comment in the chat. Or unmute yourself and speak, and I will remind you what these terms mean. But just in case, when we talk about range, we're talking about the cells which are coordinate named. So column A, number 2, column J, number 25. What is the area where our function is going to operate? And you can see the nomenclature for the range includes a column. The first set of numbers before the column is the start point, and the last set of numbers after the colon, not the column, after the colon, I'm losing words, is the end point. So you would, if you were to draw from A2 to J25, you'd create a square, and within that, that's where that is going to function. By the way, there's another example of a range after this that goes A1 and then C, no number. If you write an alphabet letter with no number, it will calculate every single cell in that column. So if you want something to apply even as more data is entered, you would use this kind of a range like it shows over in the bottom of that thing. Criterion is what we use to kind of filter through our data. So for example, if I'm looking for the term 8th grade in a column, I could be using 8th grade as a quote in quotations as my criterion, and then the filter or the function will look through for that. Or less than or equal to 5. So you can do mathematical quotations too. If I want to separate out my quiz scores by high performing, maybe 75 and above, and mid performing, 60 to 70%. And then the low performing, I could use 3 different functions to look for those numbers and then pull out the information that I want. So that's criterion. That's some of the more complex functions, which we'll talk about some of those and how they could be used. And then the word index, it really only comes up in one of the functions we're going to look at today, which is called VLOOKUP. You may have heard that one. That's a very popular one that started making the rounds in the instructional coaches circuit after we started adopting PDSA cycles, because we were able to look students up by subgroup or by other criteria specifically that we were looking for. So that's a very helpful one. We are going to talk about that today, but it uses the word index. So some functions, when you create your range and there's, say, for example, 5 columns, for some reason, the index changes to a number. So for example, in the range A1 through C100, index 2 is going to be column B. Index 1 is column A, and index 3 is column C. Now, that's probably very confusing. We'll come back to it later. But just so you know, when I say index, I'm looking for which column. And finally, any function that includes a search key, there'll be a specific thing that you're looking for. And that's just something that'll come up from time to time. Some examples are there in the text, and this is just a reference for you to look back to. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. The biggest one to remember probably is range, because that's going to be in every single function that we do. Where are we looking for that information? Okay, and another more of an infographic to help you understand what the anatomy of a function is, what are the parts of it, but it'll make more sense when we start making them together. So I'm excited to get forward to the template. Just remember the equal sign starts a function. The name of the function goes after that. I use all caps when I put the names because that's the original way that they're written, but these are not case sensitive. So if you write it in lowercase, it'll still work. The reason that I use uppercase is because I'm also trying to teach myself some programming, and in programming everything is case sensitive. So I'm just trying to train myself to do things the way that I see them rather than seeing if they work a different way. But this works uppercase and lowercase. And within parentheses, you're going to have all the stuff that you need for your function, the range, criterion, all of that extra stuff that might be there. Whenever you see a function, if there's brackets, it's optional. It means that it has a default value that if you don't put anything in there, it'll still work, just set at that default value, but you can customize it a little bit more. Okay. And once again, if all of this was just over your head, that's okay. As we practice, some of this stuff will make sense, and you may want to look back at these two graphics that I have on. This is slide 7 and 8, just in case you forget, oh, what did he mean by that? And of course, you can ask me too, but this is a reference for you for later when you're in your school and you've got deadlines coming up and you're trying to remember, how do I write this? That's what this is for. Okay, here's a cool example of a function that of a spreadsheet that has several functions in it. And you can click this link. I'm going to zoom out a little bit because I'm working with a very small window. But you can also click the link and grab it to see what it is. So this is a budget fundraising spreadsheet for the esports program at LPMS. We're looking at all the equipment we might need to fundraise for so that we can have access to playing esports on campus. And what I've done is went through to get all the items and just written what it is, right? And then how many we need, I entered that manually, right? And then I looked up the price and I entered that manually. And here's where the functions start. Over at total price, what we've got is a multiplication or a product function. And that product function is B2. So B2 is right here, the number 1. And then unit price is C2. So if I change this number, say we need 2 Nintendo Switches, that's going to change the total price over here in column D. Say we need 3 Nintendo Switches, that's going to change the total price over here, right? Say we decide, you know what, let's just borrow one from somebody. We're not going to fundraise for that this year. If I put a 0 in there, the total price goes to 0. Well, I'm going to put the 1 back. And it's dynamic. It keeps changing as I change the input. So when I've got the price, then I can play around with how many units I need, and I'll get that total price over here. Additionally, I have the total amount, which is a sum function. So it's adding everything in this column. Now look at the range. It'll be a little bit hard to see on my screen, but if you have this link from my slides, you should see what I'm looking at. It's going to be sum of D2 through D. Now, D meaning everything below. That's why there's a bunch of zeros and it goes all the way down to the bottom of the sheet. That gives me the power to add more things. If I decide we need to add something else to this budget, it can be calculated just by putting 2 numbers over here, and it'll add up everything that's here. All right. And as a matter of fact, let's see that. Yeah. And so that's what that does. And additionally, I'm calculating the sales tax that will be added onto what I buy so that I have the total price. And that's a multiply function. If I click on this box underneath where tax shows up over in this window that says FX, by the way, if you don't see that, go into the view option, click show, and please make sure that formula bar is checked. So if you don't have that, go into your menu options and click that on, and then you'll see what the formulas are. Because when I look at the text box, it's just the number that came out about from that calculation. And the current state sales tax in California is, I believe, 7.5%. If it changes or if I'm wrong about that, I can change that with just changing this number. But I'm taking the amount in F9, F9 is my total amount, and multiplying it by 0.075, which is my tax rate. That gives me this number. And then total to fundraise is a sum function of F9 and F11. So these 2 numbers, I'm adding them together, it goes here. And this number will be automatically updated as I change the numbers. If you want, make a copy of this file, make a copy, and play with those numbers yourself and see on your copy, Are you able to change those numbers? Are you able to add items to the budget? So this is a simple version of that. If you have any questions about that, please drop them in the comments. If you're ready to move on, let's go to the next part. All right. So again, just for your reference, because we're going to go over these one by one, today we're going to look at 5 different types of functions. And I came up with these categories myself. They're not reflective of anything that exists in kind of Google's databases or anything, just what I thought was most useful to teachers and what kind of groups I was able to put them in. So the first one we're going to look at is math type functions, and those are all the ones that are on that spreadsheet I just shared with you, with a couple more, followed by some importing functions, functions that help you import information or data from another tab, another part of your spreadsheet, or even a whole different spreadsheet, as long as you're the owner of that spreadsheet. There's a couple of time sensitive formulas. So formulas that will give you measurements of time, as well as what's the difference between an if function or an ifs with an S function. So some if, some ifs are examples that we're going to look at. And then I have some weird ones that I just thought were kind of cool, and we're going to play around with those too. So if this sounds good, give me that thumbs up so that I know we're ready to move on. Those functions will go bit by bit, and we're going to see how far we can get through this. Any extra time at the end will be for you to play around, get some advanced ideas and questions. So let's just get into it. All right. So math style functions, I think these are the simplest kind. It's used to calculate numerical data. So obviously, if we can't add 2 columns that have text in them, like words, we have to have numbers. And they do what they sound like they do. So these are a really great place to start. So we've got sum, product, divide, minus, average, convert, max, min, mode, percentile. Again, math people, this is your playground. Us non-math people, this is an opportunity for us to not have to do the math and let the spreadsheet do it for us. So everyone wins. The great and simple thing about these math style functions is that they're you only have to enter the range for most of them. There's one that's different, but for most of them, all you have to do is figure out where it's going. So with that being said, please go to slide number 12. There's a template, and I'm going to make a copy of this for myself. And my plan is to show you how these work, how they look, give you one of the challenges, and then I'm going to set you loose for about 7 minutes to try a challenge yourself. You're going to notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs at the bottom. Sum, average, multiply, and convert. And here's some dummy data that we're going to play around with using these functions. At the bottom, there's a mission and there's a bonus challenge. So mission start if you just want to simply see how something works. And then the bonus challenge if you want to really test yourself and try something different. And that exists for all of these tabs. And at the top, there's an explanation of the format, the general format. And remember, we had that slide at the beginning of the presentation that kind of explained what each part was. And then there's a mission and a challenge for each of these. So if you're interested in something else besides what I'm doing, go ahead and skip ahead to that tab. This is sort of a choose your own adventure. There's not going to be enough time for us to do everything, but you get to choose the part that most interests you. So I'm going to do the challenge for the sum function. You can follow along with me, and then I'm going to give you 7 minutes to choose what tab you want to do, work on stuff, and come back if you have questions, ask me in the chat, all that stuff. All right. So we're going to start with sum functions. A sum function is we put the equal sign, the word sum, and then in parentheses, the range that we're going to use. For each student, I want to sum the total number of minutes they spent studying for that week. So I've got some student names here. I've got ID numbers, class period, subgroup information, and then students reported themselves in this imaginary situation, their study time each day. And over here on column K, they want me to to sum the total time that each student spent studying. So I'm going to put the equal sign and I'm going to write, oh, I don't even have to write it. Look at this. So the wizard on the screen says sum F4 to J4, and you can see the F4 through J4 is yellow, and there's a yellow box highlighted on the screen. If that is the correct number, and it actually is, like they knew exactly what I was going to do, I can just press tab and it automatically sums those for me. However, let's enter it too, just so you can see how that would work. Equals sum parentheses, and then I'm seeing column F, number 4, F4, colon, J4, close parentheses. Perfect. Now, the wizard has also given me a suggested autofill. If that looks right, I can just press enter. If not, let me show you how I could take this and apply it. I'm going to click in the box here and I'm going to press Command-C, copy. And then I'm going to select the rest of the rows down here, down to the bottom. And I'm going to press 2-finger tap. I'm going to go paste special. And it says formula only. I'm going to click on that. Now watch what happens here. We've got the numbers are changing automatically. It stays on column F, which is good because we started on F and we went over to J. But then 4 to 4, that shows this row right here. When I go down, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So automatically it shifts the row down as the formula moves down the rows. There's ways to stop this if that's what you don't want. But in this case, that works out for us really well. Okay, so try that. I'm going to put this timer on and please go ahead and find either the bonus challenge down here or grab a tab and try something more complicated. If you get stuck on something after the time, I'll gladly demonstrate a different process if you want. And if we're ready to move on, then we'll move on. So about 6.5 minutes now. All right. Yvonne, you're saying your sheet autofilled the sums of the other columns. I'm curious. Well, let me show you what I did again, and then I'd be interested to see what that looks like. So does your column look like what I have here? Or is you saying it's different? My column K. It does look like that. Okay. So just for reference, in case you don't get the formula that you want, and sometimes that does happen, I'm just going to delete these right here. And notice something when I'm over here in column K, I'm clicking on the box and it says 102, but when I go up to the function, it doesn't say 102. It says the formula that I'm calculating. So this number 102 doesn't really exist. It is the result of the formula. So what's really in this box is the formula. If I press copy, Control-C on your Chromebook or your home PC, and then I select the columns where I want this to exist, I'm going to press Shift and click, and notice I've got highlighted all the blank spaces where I want this. And then either a right click with a mouse or a 2-finger tap with your trackpad, go into Paste Special, and the option that I want is Formula Only. So it's not going to paste the values only. The value would be the number 102, but that's not what we want. What we want is the formula. When I click it, it all shows up. Is that what you were looking for? Okay, and if there's any other issues coming up, we got about 1.5 minutes left. Okay, yeah, I can feel what you're saying about slow devices. I'm having to use my home computer because my Chromebook microphone does not work in a Google Meet for some reason, so it's running hot. It'll get there eventually. If you type it in right, it'll go. So about 1:30, we're going to come back together. If there are any other questions, or if you'd like me to demonstrate how to do one of the challenges that you got stuck on, please let me know. Otherwise, we will move on to another type of formula in 1:10 seconds. Question in the chat. What's going on?
Stephen, I'm sorry. Would you mind showing us how to do the average one? I keep
Sure.
getting an error, and I don't know why.
Are you doing it on, is it on the Monday one where you're getting the
Yes.
error?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I thought I fixed this, but perfect for me to explain what a common problem that happens. I'm going to pause that timer and I'm going to do the average one. So what happened is, all right, we're over in, for those of you who are following along here, we're over in the average. We're going to put equals average and the range we want to average. And we're putting them down here, right? Now, I'm going to show you what this looks like over on column B for Tuesday. Equals average, and it says G4 through G16. I actually don't like that formula because I want it to only do G15, G2 through G15. Yeah, that's what I want. So I'm going to press enter. And notice it does return a number. However, and I think this is what, Joanne, what you were saying is if I go equals average F2 through F15, okay, I don't know why it's not doing it for me, but excuse me, F2 equals average F2 through F15, tab to accept. Oh, it's giving me a number. All right, but you're getting an error, correct? So sometimes, and I did fix this on the template, so I don't know why it didn't click over for you, but if anyone's having trouble with that average, sometimes your numbers are not formatted correctly. For some reason, it thinks that your number is a date or a measurement of time or something like that. So what you want in this case is to change the numbers. So like, oh, yeah. So if it's, here we go. Is this the error that you're getting, Joanne? Div 0?
Yes, that's
yes. Okay. So if you notice, I switched it back. So if you notice, it's saying that these numbers are plain text, but I don't want them to be plain text. I want them to be numbers. Over here, if I look at what these say, oh, it says automatic, right? Okay. Sometimes automatically it works. Sometimes it's not what you want it to be. So with these numbers highlighted, and I'm going to keep this error function right here, I'm just going to make sure that they're numbers. So I'm going to go over here. Actually, I like this one down here, but let's just go up to where it says number. We're going to click number. It changes to a number. And these decimal points, if they bother you, there's a little button up here that says decrease decimal places, and we can just decrease them till it's a number. And that should fix it. Let me know if that fixed it for you.
All right, thank you.
So yeah, and this happens all the time with data because it's meant to automatically detect what it is. But if the spreadsheet makes an error, you can go in, highlight those numbers or that entire column, and even, you can even press command and get rid of the ones that you don't want to focus on. And just change the number using either the format number menu, like I have right here, or there's even some shortcuts down here where it says 1, 2, 3, gives me my numbers. All right. And once again, I can remove those decimal places if I want. I can decrease everything to 2 decimal places or 1 decimal place or nothing. And then that works. And if I also want here, I've got 10.9166666, an irrational number. Let me just reduce that down to something that my kids can work with, right? Down to 2 decimal places. So if it's not doing what you want, there's some ways to modify the number. Okay. Any other questions before we move ahead? If you're ready to move on, give me a thumbs up in the chat, or a crying face if that's how you're feeling right now, because there's some math involved. We've got some thumbs. I've got a question. Is it another question, Joanne?
No, I got it.
Oh, you're good to go. Okay, so let's move on then. Okay, it gets a little more complicated after this, but how do we use this? This is a great budgetary planning type thing. Fundraising projects like the thing that I shared. We actually use some version of this for calculating adjunct duty in our at our site. As a matter of fact, if you want to know one of the very useful functions, and this one is a little more complicated, it's down here. And later, if you want to play with that, yeah, go for it. You can convert the number of minutes into hours or fractions of an hour. And we ended up doing that to calculate total adjunct duty time using a spreadsheet and a Google form at my site. And it's really helpful. However, you're having students track their own information. You can make a template for them on that, like AR reading time or how much time a student spends studying, and let them see for themselves what the end result is of all of their efforts. So we can add students into this equation too. All right. Next style that I want to talk about is import style. So this allows you to take data from one place and move it to another one. A famous one in this district, like I mentioned, is VLOOKUP. Some of you may not know this, but a little bit after, I want to say in 2020 or 2021, XLOOKUP was introduced as a replacement for VLOOKUP. And what it can do is just a little more specific than VLOOKUP, but you can customize it in some more ways. There is an article linked if you're a big nerd like me and you want to know the difference between VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP. I couldn't explain it better than how this article explains it. We do have both of those in the template we're looking at. And the other one that we're going to look at is import range. And import range allows you to move information from one spreadsheet to another spreadsheet, provided that you're the owner of both spreadsheets. And so now that you own a math spreadsheet, the one that I just gave you, you can practice that if you're interested in seeing how that works. Another thing we need to note is that if we're moving information from one tab to another, there's a specific way that we need to explain it. And that is by putting the tab name, an exclamation point, which is a marker that means this is a tab, and then the range. So for example, if you have a tab called raw data, is the example that's there, you would write the word raw data, an exclamation point, and then the range connected to that with no spaces in between. If it's on the same tab, you won't need to put it in quotation marks. If it is on a different tab, you will need to put it in quotation marks. So these are just the ones that I find most useful. There's a lot more, and I'm going to link to where you can find all the functions that exist for spreadsheets. Some I feel are more or less relevant to teaching, but feel free to play around with those too. Okay, so here's a template. Make a copy for yourself. I'm going to do one of the challenges. And as you notice, the explanation for VLOOKUP got real long. And to be honest, it's because it's a more complex function, but we can do it in a very simple way. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to use this is where we get into that stuff like search key and index and all of that. We're going to look for a specific thing within a range on the spreadsheet on this sheet right here. Import range if you want to learn about importing from a completely different spreadsheet. And then we're going to define the range where we're looking, and then we're going to say what column we want to import the data from. So this is that same spreadsheet that same bit of data we were looking at before. And here's our mission. We need to look up the ID number of a student named Jean Gray, and we need to create a function that will do this. The first thing I'm going to do, and there's two ways to do this, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to write that student's name so I can reference this cell right here, because when I click on it, it says that name. So I'm going to create a VLOOKUP that's going to give me the ID. I'll just write ID down here so I know what I'm looking at. And then the VLOOKUP function, I'm going to put it here. So the format is, as mentioned above, VLOOKUP, search key, what I want to find, the range, and then the index, which means the column number where I'm going to pull that information. And there's this thing that says is sorted, and it's in brackets, which means that if I don't include that, it'll give me the default value, which is what I want in this case. So I'm not going to add anything after that. So equals VLOOKUP, parentheses. My search key is going to be B17. I could enter this text in quotations if I wanted to, but since I wrote it here, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that it's written right there. And notice that it's highlighted. Comma. Now it's time for my range. And my range, put a space right there, is going to be A. See, we got A, column A right here. A4 to I15. Let's just do the whole thing. A4 colon I15. Okay, that's my range. And the index is which column do I want the information from? I want the ID number, and the ID number is in column B. Since my range starts with A, each column is an index number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to whatever number letter I is. I know that my information is in column B, so my index is 2. And when I close parentheses and press enter, there's the ID number of the student that I want. And if I look, because it's a small bit of data, Jean Gray, ID number 000002, which is what's here. By the way, since I did this, now if I put somebody else's name in this box, it'll automatically update. So if I put Scott Summers and press enter, now I have his ID number, which is right here. So I basically made myself a search function within the spreadsheet that'll give me exactly the information that I want. Pretty cool. Okay. Once again, I'm going to turn you loose. You've got the template, and there's a challenge for each of the styles. We've got VLOOKUP, a little explanation here. We've got XLOOKUP and some of the differences for what you can do here, and some challenges down here. And then we've got the import range function, which is very tricky. I'll agree. I'll say that right now. So if you're not up for the challenge, it's okay. You can come back to it at another point in time. But it's really powerful for moving information from one spreadsheet to a completely different one, provided that you are the owner of that spreadsheet. So, of course, 7 minutes is not enough time to do all of these. I think you should pick one that you're interested in learning about, try it out, see if it works. All right, 7 minutes begins. Go ahead and come back when you're ready, or any questions you have, I'll be here. Got about 2 more minutes on the timer. If there's any requests for me to demonstrate anything that you're stuck on, please let me know. We'll be coming back together to talk about something else in just about 2 minutes. All right, about 10 minutes, start coming back to the chat. I'm going to ask how we're doing, because it's kind of complicated what we're learning. And if it's overwhelming, give me a thumbs down or a crying face emoji. If you're feeling good and would like me to show you something more advanced with these types of formulas, give me that thumbs up and we'll just kind of see where we're at. We've got, okay, a little bit of a crying emoji. Okay, feeling a little overwhelmed, halfway there. Okay. So let's save that one, but I would love to, during our sandbox time or even throughout the year, come back to this idea of nesting two equations. You can actually apply one to the other. So the import range function using a filter function. So I wouldn't bring the entire spreadsheet in. I would just bring in a part of it. It's really cool. It's kind of tricky. I'm going to save that one because I think some of us are just not ready for that. But I will show you what it looks like. So I'm going to go to the next slide. How do we use this? So this helps us find the data we need quickly. It helps us search for things in large spreadsheets that have more stuff than we're able to find. It also can help us make custom search terms. If we're looking for one type of data all the time, we can have a specific part of our spreadsheet that finds that data for us whenever we need it. Nested import range functions help me make my favorite spreadsheet that I never get to talk about. So I am going to talk about it right now. I mentioned before that so this is my favorite spreadsheet. And it's related to, it's an import range function. So if you look at the top of this, you're going to see it's actually a query import range, but you could also do this with a filter import range, meaning that I'm filtering out information and then bringing it in to another spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet that is this one right here. This is, I mentioned okay, so I have a question about it when you're done. Okay, so Geneva, I will gladly answer your question. You could type it in the chat and I'll pick it up in just a second. So this is form responses, and I've changed them. They're not the names of our staff members, of course, as you can see. But collecting email addresses, the email addresses gave a total of minutes from what people entered on the spreadsheet. So you can still look at the raw data, but it's summarizing that information here, their total minutes, and then that total time convert using a convert function from the previous spreadsheet that we looked at gives me the hours that the person spent. And I also have conditional formatting that changes color according to where that person is at. So if someone's only entered a few hours of adjunct duty, it's red. It's yellow if it's a medium number between 6 and 7, 5, like 5 and 7. And then if you're getting closer to like 8 to 10, we got green because you're almost there. And then if you happen to put more hours than you need to, it turns blue. So you're like a superstar, like this Sherlock Holmes fellow. But teachers were asking me, okay, well, can I see how much adjunct duty I have? Because I don't remember. And I thought, that's a good idea, but I can't share this spreadsheet because it has everyone else's adjunct duty on it. And that's not okay for me to tell the entire staff what other people have. That's an admin prerogative. That data is sensitive. So I created this import range function and I gave view access to any teacher that wanted it. And what I can do is I can change the email address. So let's say I want to know Sherlock.Holmes@SalinasUHSD.org. Now, when I press enter, this number should change to the number of hours that Sherlock Holmes has, 13.5. Let's go back to our sheet and double check. Mr. Holmes right here, 13.5 hours. So depending on what email address is there, and if I want to even make it more mysterious how I get my work done, I can take this column right here and I can hide it and it still works. So it's just the total time now. That person does not have the ability to enter anyone else's email and see their adjunct duty hours because I don't give them edit access, but they can see it and it will update dynamically as they enter information into that spreadsheet or through the Google form. So I got a question about that. Let me just come over here to my chat is really small because I'm working on a couple of windows. So let's see. In your search spreadsheet, you have it where the email has to match in order to pull the data. Can you make it where it can be partially entered, like it contains function instead of equals? I know that's possible. I have not done it. And so I'm not sure how, but I do know that there is a way to do it. I was just looking up some stuff like that this morning. I'd be happy to reach out to you with an article about that at a later date, as soon as I have a chance to find what I was looking at before. However, if you set up the Google form to automatically collect the email, the reason that I went with email is because sometimes we were doing it with entering people's names, and sometimes people spell their own names wrong. And so like fully professional teachers were entering their name incorrectly, like spelling it wrong or not putting a space between first and last name, so it wasn't picking it up. So my solution was have them collect email. They don't have to enter their name at all, and it will automatically match. A way to do this with entering student data would be if you have them enter their ID number. It's hard for them to get that number wrong, or because if they put in their email, they might spell it wrong, or they spell their names differently than how it is on their records, or they use a different name or a nickname. So my solution for that is either email or ID number. But yes, it is possible to do an approximate match with some of these functions. It's just a little more complicated than I've personally had experience doing. So anyway, there's that. There's a lot of possibilities when you get the basics down here. Let's go a little bit simpler for the next one. So the next section that we're going to talk about is time. Oh, and Geneva, by the way, you can set those settings after the fact. If you want to have them collect their email, you can set that up on the form, and then it will make a column for the email after the fact. So you can actually modify those. Just another thought. But it is possible. Okay, so let's talk about time functions. I can actually make a spreadsheet tell me what day it is and what date if I'm forgetting. So let's look at this. I'm going to actually go straight to the template now. Make copy for myself. And there's only 2 tabs here, and they talk about 2 different functions. Today and now are 2 that I'd love to have you check out. Go to the next column. And in this case, you're going to actually not put anything inside the parentheses. So let me show you this one, and I'll have you do the next one. Equals today, and parentheses, but nothing besides the parentheses. When I press enter, I've got 7/26/2024. Hey, that's today's date. How cool. Every time I open up this spreadsheet, it's going to tell me today's date. Awesome. How about right now? So the formula I want you to enter is now equals now in parentheses. We'll take a shorter time for this, maybe 5 minutes would be better because this is a really simple one. What happens? You can put it in the chat if you catch it. What happens when I put now in this box B4? Okay, if anyone managed to make it happen, if I press now and put parentheses around it, it gives me not only the date, but a timestamp. For me, 11:04 and 21 seconds. I can even modify that if I really want to. I go into these numbers and I will look for custom date and time. I can have it say the month out loud, or I can do it like this if this is something more interesting to me. Month, August, day, 5, year, 1930. So when I apply it, it says July 26, 2024. Same thing here. If I go into the numbers, custom date and time, whichever of these works for me, I can easily do that. I can even have the day of the week. Let's do this one and we'll apply. Friday, July 26, 2024. All right, and this will change when the date changes. Moving on from that, here's what I'd like to challenge you with. I'll give you 5 minutes to see if you could figure this out. When I have today's date right here, and I have a project due date, so I've written that date right here, I can calculate how many work days I have left from this date to that date using net work days. I can also say how many days, if I'm going to be realistic and say, hey, look, I'm going to be working on this project on the weekends, and I just need to know how many days I have. I'll show you this one. Equals days, and I'm going to put the parentheses. Whoops, parentheses. I need the end date. The end date is in B4, so I'm going to write B4. And then the start date is today's date, which is B2. B2, close parentheses. I've got 158 days left. And tomorrow I'll have 157 days left. It will count down to the days that I need. Now, what if I was only thinking about weekends? Here's what it'll look like. Equals net work days. The start date is today's date, so that's B2. And the end date is the due date, which is B4. All right. And there's another option, and it's in brackets, so I don't have to enter it. It'll just tell me 113. But over on the side here, I've got some holidays. What if I want to account for those holidays? If I've got them written down, I can press the next one. You see how holidays is highlighted in the wizard here. And the holidays are dated from E3 all the way down to E8. So E3 colon E8. And notice there are now 6 less days available to me. It says 109, but if I remove that, it says 113. So let me do that again, E3 through E8. So if I'm calculating a project and how much time we have left with my PLC or even with my students, we can see the numbers count down, and we can include or not include weekends and holidays. So this could be really useful for planning, tracking ideas, or doing projects, even with your students, with your PLC, with groups that you work with, committees, that sort of thing. We can include this information. We can have it update dynamically. All right. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes this time just to try that out. Again, the template is there. If you have extra time and you want to go back to some of the other templates that we've been working on, go for it. Continue to ask questions in the chat. And I'm going to close when we're at 2 minutes because it's a 7-minute timer. All right, I see a comment from Victoria. If you want to work in silence, I don't mind if you mute me for the next 5 minutes. But Victoria, I'm going to go back and demonstrate the VLOOKUP for you and anyone else who might be stuck on that one. Let's see. I've got to find where my, here we go. Okay, so we're on the VLOOKUP tab. And just a note that what we need to make sure we have is a search key. So what are we looking for? a range, where are we looking for it, and an index. Now, an interesting thing about VLOOKUP is I can only go left to right. So if my search key is on the left, for example, if I'm searching for ID number, VLOOKUP can't look at the column to the left. However, XLOOKUP can. So if you need to do that, you just need to use the XLOOKUP function. But let's use the VLOOKUP and just remember that whatever you search for, you can only import what's on the side. Okay, so let's do this right now. I'm going to go VLOOKUP. I'm going to come back here. Let's import all of Scott Summers' information. So all of his study times all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to do that. So start with equals VLOOKUP. All right, and that's what I want. So I'm going to press tab to accept. My search key is going to be Scott Summers. So that's going to be B17. And this way I can actually change the name that's in that box, so it will automatically import information from another student. So I think that's more useful to me than just writing the name, even though I could write that. Okay, when I press comma, it switches over to range. So my range is going to be, I got to start where Scott Summers is, where the names are. Let's say A4, and we're going to go, since I'm going to import all of this information, I'm going to go to I15. So A4 colon I15. And then to move to the next term, I need to put a comma. My index is what I want to import from. Okay, and then, so index is, I like I said, I want to import the ID number, study time, so B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. I want to import all of it. So that's going to be, my index starts at 1 and goes all the way over. So 1, so that's 1. We don't want 1. We want 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it should be 2 through 9. And then that's my index. And is sorted is something we can leave in its default settings. Okay. I guess the dash thing doesn't work. Give me a second here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that right? Let me make sure that those numbers are correct, because it looks like it's going to throw an error. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It takes 4 arguments. This is arguments number 10. Oh, okay. So I can't have commas in there. Give me a second. 2, 9. Wonder if I can just enter. I'm getting a reference number, calculator, circular dependency detected. Okay. To I15. I wonder if it's the ampersand. Well, nope. Okay. Well, let's just focus on importing one thing then. We'll just import the ID number. So the index is 2 because we've got column A, and then column B, the second column in my range, is there. So it's going to give me, as you can see, it's going to give me 000001, which is Scott Summers' ID number. Let's say I want to get his test score. That's going to be index 9. And that is the percentage that he got on the test. You can see in the corner there, 10. He hasn't been studying. If I press enter, it's right there. Okay. So those are the parts that function there in that function. I must have a search key, the range, and then I need to have the index where the results are going to come from. And you'll notice when I find my search key, it's going to go across the way to the index number, in our case 9, and then give me that number here. I hope that helped. I've got to look up how do I import multiple columns, because I know it's possible. That might be with an XLOOKUP. I might be thinking that one wrong, but it's a learning process for me as well. I'm sure, as you can see, it's not 100%. Okay, I ended up giving you guys 7 minutes while I was demonstrating there. So as issues come up, I work to try and solve them and figure them out. It is a process. You might not get all your questions answered today in this session, but I'm available. And if a question is unanswered, I will reach out to you and let you know when I figure out what it is. All right. So that's VLOOKUP and all those imports, as well as those time functions. We've got two more to talk about, two more groups, right? I'm just going to make sure that that's right. Yeah. Okay. So after that, we will be in Sandbox and you can start creating the thing that you need to create. So what is an if function and what's the difference between an if and an ifs function? So an if function adds criteria, meaning something to filter your data through. So you remove things that do not apply. It's very helpful in that case. Two of the most common ones are COUNTIF or COUNTIFs, and also SUMIF and SUMIFs. And those are the ones we're going to look at today. So another template. I'm going to make a copy. All right. The basic formula output here is COUNTIF and then range and criterion. And you only get one criterion for COUNTIF. However, if you're using a COUNTIFs, you can have multiple criteria and it will only return the options where both criteria are true. So let's try a COUNTIF. First mission, how many students total scored higher than 70% on the quiz? Well, let's find that out here. I'm going to use SUMIF equals, I'm going to use COUNTIF. I apologize. Equals COUNTIF, and the range I'm looking for is going to be in column L. So it's going to be L4 to L15. L4, comma, L15. And, comma, my criterion is greater than 70. And I don't need that in quotation marks. I'm just going to click on that, and we should see the results right here. Oh, give me an error. Let me look at that again. Maybe I made a mistake here. I do need quotation marks. I apologize. And that's why that wizard is really helpful. It reminded me what I missed. Okay, so greater than the number 70. L4 to L15. That's not correct. Why?
I think your parentheses is in the wrong place. Try that.
Oh, yes, you are correct. There we go. Thank you. All of that happens. You need a passcode. Maria, can you explain to me what you mean by passcode?
So I don't have my fob key, and I'm trying to sign in via my phone, and it's asking for a passcode.
Oh, I'm afraid I can't help you with that. That's gonna be an IT issue. If they're in today, you can call them and they might be able to help you out. The only thing I can say is that these templates will be available as well as this recording if you're not able to get in time. But unfortunately, that's not a code that I'm able to give out because I don't have it. Sorry.
Okay, I just want you to be my witness that I attended.
Okay, yeah, no, attendance is also being marked via the Google Meet. So you're here, and all the materials are still available to you after all of that gets figured out. So that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry that for the interruption in your learning. That's a bummer.
No worries. I'll try IT.
Okay, yeah. If they're in today, and they should be, they might be able to give you that code. So we do have greater than 70 equals 4. And if I look, there are 4 students that scored greater than 70. Excellent. Now, what if I wanted to use a COUNTIFs function to figure out how many EOs, so I've got my EOs and my ELs over here, how many EOs scored lower than 50? Let's see if I can do that. I'm going to go equals COUNTIF with an S because I need multiple criteria. The criteria range 1. So I'm looking for, where am I looking for the first part? I'm going to start from the left and move to the right. So it's going to be D4 to D16. D4, D16. And then we're looking for, the criteria is going to be the text string EO. And then parentheses, quotations close, and then the comma. The second criteria is going to be L4 to L15 because that's where the scores are. L15. And then the criterion is in quotations less than. And if I want to do less than or equal to, I would just put an equal sign right after it. Less than or equal to 50. Close my quotations. Close my parentheses. Interesting. I'm getting an error again. This happens sometimes. Let's just see if I can fix that real quick. Okay, I'm in criterion range 1. Criterion 1, EO, okay. Criterion range 2. Oh, it's because for some reason I wrote 16 and not 15. Well, let's do that again. Aha. And let's see if that does it. Yes. I have 5 EOs that scored 50% or lower. And if you look over on my data, that is true. Can anyone find for me the number of ELs that scored lower than 50? That's my count ifs function. And I'll need the criterion to be EL instead of EO for D4 to D15. And for L4 to L15, I want it to be the number less than 50, and it's going to be in quotation marks. If anyone can figure out that number, place it in the chat, and then I'll demonstrate that function for you guys. Additionally, if you're interested in learning about sum if functions, you can also come over here. We're starting our time with the template right now, right? Anyone who's got ELs that scored lower than 50%, that's a count ifs function. And we need to pull the ELs and we need to pull the range of the total score, and it needs to be less than 50. Okay, we have our first guess. That's 3. All right. I got a question though, Geneva. Are you doing lower than 50 or less than or equals to 50? Because that would change. I don't think that actually.
Sorry, lower than 50.
Lower than 50. Okay, that is not correct. I'm wondering if there's an error in your formula. We're searching for ELs. Do you think could you paste the formula into the chat? I could have a look at it.
Sorry, I'm a bad student. I was doing EOs. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So EOs that scored lower than 50. Well, all you need to do is change the text of EL to EO, or EO to EL, and see what that's. And that is correct, actually. Less than 50, 3 EOs scored that. So then there would be a question of changing that parameter from EL to EO, or from EO to EL. Okay, and we've got about 3.5 minutes, well, a little bit more than 4. Okay. Correct. There are 0 on this data set of ELs that scored less than 50%. Could you please copy and paste your formula into the chat so people could see what the correct formula looks like? Remember that this is a formula for ELs that scored lower than 50 on the test. Yeah, we got count ifs, okay, from D4 to D15, and we're looking for EL in quotation marks, comma to the next criteria, which is L4 to L15, and less than 50 in quotation marks. That is 100% correct. Well done. With that being done, you may be interested in the last couple of minutes. We've got about 2.5 minutes left, having a look at sum if and sum ifs. Are you able to sum the total study time of students who scored 70% or higher on the quiz? So if I take all the students, sum if this number is higher than 70, I want to sum this information right here. Or in column K, the total study time. So I want to sum everything where this number is higher than 70. That's an extra bonus challenge if you have already figured this out and you're an expert. Additionally, if we use a sum ifs function, we can actually have the criterion of EL versus EO and their score. So what's the total study time of the ELs who scored higher than 50%? I can delineate the subgroups and figure out how much time did each group spend studying. I could even find out my SWDs, how much study time total did they have? what about my EL/SWDs? With a sum ifs function, I can sum all those numbers for myself right here in this box. About a minute. Just remember, if you're going from these basic addition, subtraction, multiplication functions into these more complex countifs functions, don't be discouraged if it's a lot right now. That's why this worksheet works. I understand that, Geneva. I've had 2 cups of coffee and a cup of tea already, so I am wired. If you have these templates to go back to practice, if you feel like this is a skill that will be very helpful to you in your workflow. And you have me throughout the year. Just FYI, there are certain subjects that some ed techs are kind of more skilled at than others. So oftentimes, if you know something and you ask your ed tech, you want to know something, they'll just ask the person that's the expert. For me, it's Spreadsheets. I think if you want to know something about Canva, the person is going to be Amber Dodd. If you want to know something about AI programs, either going to be Brian Tuminelli or Gabby Davia. And if you ask your ed tech, they're just going to ask the person who's the expert. So you can ask your ed tech spreadsheet questions. They will ask me, or you can ask me directly. This is not just a one-time thing for this one training. It may take more to learn. Okay, so I do want to go to the very last thing, and then that's going to put us in. We're going to have maybe like 45 minutes for full sandbox time. I can demonstrate any of the challenges that you couldn't complete, or if you're trying to make a specific kind of spreadsheet, I would gladly help you out with that. Let me just move a little bit further here. So we do this a lot in the ed tech large data calculation world. I use countif functions to get response frequencies. So if we're using, for example, our technology survey that we had this last year, we had, thousands, I think more than 1,000, 2,000, I don't know, entries of students telling their opinions about certain things in technology. And so we did these countif functions to figure out, okay, how many students said that they use this daily? How many students said they use this weekly, monthly? That was something that helped us a lot to kind of process that data and figure out what are things used with high frequency, what do our students have confidence in, what do they need training for, all of that stuff. And this will also be helpful if you're gauging students' understanding through Google Forms, and then you get that spreadsheet and you need to sum and calculate something really quick. You can also do this with averages. So there's an average if and an average ifs function that's really helpful too. Okay, so here's some weird ones. I want to show you some weird functions that may become useful in your everyday life. And this is also that choose your own adventure kind of thing. So if you don't think something's going to be useful to you, all right, go ahead and ignore it and it's fine. But this one right here, I'm going to actually go through each of these really quickly just to show you what functions could look like, and I will let you play with it. So they're not really connected to each other. They're just kind of the grab bag of random ones that I wanted to talk about, but we didn't have a specific category for them. So I'm going to start with, what's that first tab? Sorry, my windows are loading kind of slowly. Okay, let's talk about a split. This is a common problem. I had the students enter their first and last name, but I want to sort them by last name, so I can't do that because the last name's attached here. So we're going to use the split function. Watch this. Equals split colon, all right? And I'm going to enter the cell that I want to split from is this one over here, A4. So A4. And what I need, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I need to start with a thing called a delimiter. No, the text is, okay, text is A4. All right, it's in A4. And now it's asking me for a delimiter. A delimiter is the specific part of the cell that we're going to split from. And for me, the delimiter is the space. So I'm actually going to put a space in quotations. And then I'm going to put, I'm just going to put a comma because these other things split by each and remove empty text. I don't actually have to put anything there because it will automatically give me the default, which is what I want. So when I press enter, there we go. I have the first name and the last name split into 2 different sections. Pretty cool. Let me tell you about join. What if I want to do the opposite? Well, if I want to take first name and last name and put it all together into one column, let's do equals join. All right. If they have 2 last names, you would need 3 columns, right? Or 4 columns, however you're going to do it. And your delimiter is delimiter is still the space, because if they have a space between those names, then you're able to do that. Or if you have the idea where it's like a hyphenated name, you could perform the split function and you would get first name and then the last name with a hyphen, then go over to the next column, do the split again, and make your delimiter the hyphen. And then you'll get that other name in a 3rd column. You just need to make sure that you have an empty column for that text to go to. So in this case, we're doing a delimiter again. And in this case, for a join, the delimiter is what goes in between those 2 cells, the text in those cells. So for me, it's still a space, okay? The value array is going to be B4. And then the other one that I'm going to add is going to be C4, all right? And I get that name. Here we go. When I press enter. Cool. What happens if I don't put the delimiter or the delimiter? It'll bring the student's name in with no sentences. All right, so show it with 2 last names. All right, well, let's just pretend that it's the situation where it's a. I'm just gonna make another. I'll go back to the split for that. So let's take Kurt Wagner, and then we'll make him. I'm gonna adopt him, Kurt Wagner Elliott. Here we go. And then I'm gonna make another row. I'm going to insert a column to the right. Okay, so here we go. For the first, we're going to do a split first name, last name. And it's going to be equals split. And then same as before, the text we're looking for is A4, comma. Our delimiter is the space. So a space in between. And then we close it. Okay, so that gives me the 2 last names like this. But if I wanted to split it even further, then I guess I would need another one. The last name is usually not in an additional column. So you can add them to the column, right? I'm not sure. What do you mean? Is it like that the text is all in a single? I'm confused at that question. I could do another split here, which would be split, equals split C4 by a space. But in this case, my delimiter is not going to be a space. Well, if you were looking at, let me see if I'm answering this question correctly. Let me just delete this column right here. If, for example, this was just the name with these spaces right here, then we would end up with these 3 split across the column because the space is our delimiter. It's where we decide it's going to split. Is that what you wanted, or you wanted something else? Okay. Well, the easiest way, you would have this and this. The easiest way would be to just select, if you wanted these 2 to be together, the space would separate it into 3 columns. If that works, then okay, you can still split by the first letter of their last name. If you wanted to move them together, you could either merge them. Oh, nope, you cannot merge them. You could join them. So adding another one right here, column to the right. Oops, not to the right. Column to the left. All right. We can just do a join here, and then the delimiter is a space, and the column here is C4 and D4. Boom. And then if we wanted to just make that look a little bit prettier, we can hide these columns, and then you would get, without any other pieces, you would get that first and last name how you want it. And these particular formulas can be copied and pasted in the same way as I was showing before. So if I copy paste here, paste special, formula only. We would get that, but first we need this over here. Copy special formula only. Doom, 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 doom. Oh, why does it all say Wagner? What's going on? Let's do that again. Paste special formula only. What? Oh, because of the. Okay, there we go. So if you ever see those dollar signs, it means that the number will not change if you move up or down the columns, which is useful sometimes, but a lot of times we don't need that. So just remove those if you see them. And there we go. And we've got all of our first and last names in one column. And then there's just this column right here that's hidden where it's those two columns where the last names are split out. So with that being done, all of this could work out that way. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that would be my solution. Okay. Here's a fun one. I cannot pronounce this, so I'm just gonna take a punt, I guess. Concatenate, which basically is you can add text onto a cell. So if I got student ID numbers, but I wanted emails, here's what I can do: equals concatenate. Okay. Tab. All right. String 1 is gonna be D4. So the ID number. Okay. And then I'm going to add, in quotations, at student.salinasuhsd.org, close quotations, close parentheses, and enter. Now, instead of ID numbers, I've got emails. And the wizard assumes that I want to do that for all of them. If I press this check mark, they're all just going to show up. So that's very useful. And you can do, if you go over to where it says left, you can actually do the opposite. Let's say I want the ID numbers, but I did have them collect the emails. So I just need to turn these into ID numbers. Let me do this real quick. Equals left. And what it's going to do is it's going to cut off everything to the right of the number of characters that I ask. So the string is E4. And then I need to give them a number. There's 6. It's a 6-digit ID, so my number is going to be 6. When I press enter, and autofills got me. Now I have ID numbers as a separate column, just in case I need it. And if I decide that, well, with these ID numbers, I don't even want to deal with these emails, let me do a 2-finger tap. Let me hide that column. Now I've got the ID number only. All right, so that's a very useful one. I want to be aware of time because I am noticing that we have about 30 minutes and maybe we need a little bit of a break. So I do have some cool spreadsheets that I would love to show off, but I'm not sure if we are going to be able to get into that. But here are some resources, some different things that you can look at to help you kind of navigate some of the basics here if you want to go back and look at things. As a matter of fact, this link right here goes to all of the functions that exist and how to write them. So that's something that you could reference back as you're going through this journey. If you want to hear about or have me talk about any of these spreadsheets, I'll leave them up here, but I want to give you that break. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And when we come back, the remaining time will be for you to build something or create something for your classrooms, or even just practice some of these functions. And I'll just be here as a guide. So with that being said, a 5-minute break. I will stay here. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. Let's come back to the chat at 11:52, and then we'll have about 20-25 minutes for whatever it is that you still want to work on, or some practice and how I can help. So let's begin. All right, it is 11:52. I am actually going to stop the